And we are going to next hear from Councilmember Roy Lancman, followed by Councilmember Lander.
Good morning.
Good morning.
5 minutes to go before afternoon. It's good to see you, Commissioner, and for you and I to somewhat reprise our role, you coming from OCFS in the state and I was in the State Assembly. And as you might recall, I chaired a subcommittee on workplace safety, and we worked very collaboratively with OCFS to try to address the issue of workplace violence in the juvenile justice system. So I do look forward to working with you, hopefully as collaboratively here in the city in our new capacities. I want to ask you about two issues. One, just to get some clarification on the AWOL rate and what is being done about it, and then I do want to get into some details on the issue of workplace safety in the close to home program. So, as I understand it, looking at the mayor's management report, it would seem to indicate that the AWOL rate at non-secure placement facilities is very low. The 4-month actual for FY14 is at 0.8. But I recall reading, and I pulled up articles from last year in the New York Times and the Daily News, which indicated a much higher AWOL rate. The Times in particular wrote, in the first 8 months, 422 warrants were issued for more than 200 residents who had run away. That's approximately a 20% or 25% AWOL rate. And in one case, there was a Queens Family Court judge who was, I guess, hearing the case of a youth whose placement level needed to be adjusted, described it as a, quote, potential threat to public safety. So could you explain to me the difference in the AWOL rates that the press seems to be reporting and the judge seemed to recognize, and what's in the mayor's management report?
So I think that's was early on in the implementation of close to home. I think that ACS, and certainly was a concern at the state when I was at the state, I think that ACS has done an incredible amount of work to impact on that and reduce the number of AWOLs. And the number of AWOLs is low. We've increased the use of both our investigative consultants on our staff and also a partnership with the police and a partnership with the sheriff to really impact on that and have designated staff responsible for reducing that. But that is something that you constantly have to work on. So I think we're in a better place. There's always room for improvement. And that's, some of the things that I want to avoid in an implementation of limited secure to make sure that that doesn't happen as we move forward in implementing the second phase of close to home.
Because I know I don't have to tell you that public support for this initiative is really important. And for many of the people that I represent, the first thing that they intuitively feel when you're talking about bringing people who have been adjudicated of committing some wrongdoing, of bringing them literally close to home in non-secure placements is whether or not that's going to endanger public safety. Are you comfortable or confident that the numbers that's reported in the mayor's management report, that 0.8, that's an accurate number?
Yes, based on all the reports and information that I've received, I actually think it's probably a little lower today than even 8%.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. And again, I know I don't need to emphasize with you how important it is that we have public support for this program, which, when we were in Albany together in our different positions, we both supported very, very strongly. Mm-hmm. Let me just ask you about the issue of workplace violence. The work that we did in Albany was rooted in the state's workplace violence prevention law, which, as you know, requires public employers in particular to have a workplace violence prevention policy in place. It's very detailed, it's structured, it requires collaboration with the workforce. And we passed legislation as part of our work together and part of our review, which would extend the reporting requirements, the workplace violence prevention requirements, to nonprofit entities that have these juvenile justice placements. As you recall, there were some spectacular failures in upstate of nonprofit providers who individuals either went AWOL or caused violence against staff. And so we extended that law to include those nonprofit providers, which my reading of the law would also include the close-to-home providers here in New York City. Do you know, have you had an opportunity to determine whether or not that juvenile justice workplace violence prevention law, which is supposed to apply to those nonprofit close-to-home providers in New York City, whether or not they are following through with that, whether they are adhering to that, and if so, well, let me just let you answer that question.
So it's something that I am reviewing right now. You know, like you, great interest of mine to make sure that our staff are safe and that we really understand how to keep staff safe and have the systems and procedures in place to facilitate that and the structure. So that's one of the things that I'm reviewing right now to see whether we are or whether we come under that and how are we doing.
Okay, so I'm gonna follow up, as I'm sure many of my colleagues will follow up with a written request to get to the bottom of that. And I know that you're relatively new, like I am, and many of us are, and so if you could look into that and get us a response, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lancman.